I'm here with Shane NEMAN. He's an extremely successful private equity investor. He also delves in real estate and other ventures. He started in Nightlife, and that's where I met him. I've met and worked with Shane off and on when he was working with Easy Texting and Junebug for about 17 or 18 years. Similar to me, he actually started in New York City and then relocated down to South Florida. I think he did that way earlier than the majority of people. He did that, I think, around like 2013 or 2014, right?
Yeah, 2014. It was the end of 2014, almost
Yeah,
10
so
years ago.
yeah,
So,
he was definitely way in front of the curve. When I moved down here into Miami, I then would frequently see some of our mutual friends just walking around Brickell. But Shane has a tendency to be ahead of the curve, and he's probably one of my more successful friends. So if you are interested in learning more about someone who is extremely successful and who also is a hustler, not in a derogatory way, but someone who's entrepreneurial and who makes things happen, then I definitely would recommend watching this entire video, both for the nightlife content and also from the entrepreneurial and starting companies and monetization and private equity and things of that nature. So without further ado, let's get started. If Shane, if you
well,
could be
thank
so
you for
kind
having
to,
me, first and foremost. I really appreciate it, David. That was really a nice introduction, and I'm really flattered for you to have me here. I've known you for a really long time, and the feeling is really mutual.
it's my pleasure. Before we get into it and we get into the quick backstory and things of that nature, I wanted to mention that Shane recently wrote a book on nightlife, and
Yes,
that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on. And
I
we'll
have it
discuss
right
that.
here. Nightlife lessons just came out like a couple of days ago, actually. So very took almost 2 years to write, and been waiting for this moment for a long time, leading up to this moment for sure.
We'll discuss the book later on in the chat, but for those people, I know that some people they log on and then they tend to click off. It doesn't have like 100% viewership throughout the course of like a 40-minute video. So if you search for Nightlife Lessons, Shane NEMAN, and I'll leave a link below in the description in the pinned comment. And if you purchase his book, then I am providing a free 1 week of trade alerts to every single person who purchases that book. All you have to do is send me the Amazon receipt. And if you purchase that book, and then also if you leave him a 5-star review, then I'll provide you with another free week. So you can actually
Thank
earn
you.
2 free weeks of trade alerts simply by purchasing the book and then leaving him a 5-star review. It will be my pleasure because Shane, I really believe he's one of my more successful friends, like I've mentioned, and I think that you can derive a lot of valuable lessons from the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Can you briefly discuss like a quick backstory, like where you grew up, what you were like
Sure.
as a kid, where you went to college, how you got interested in nightlife?
Yeah, so I grew up mostly on Long Island in New York. In New York, came from a middle class uh, Persian Jewish family that immigrated in the late 70s. So I grew up seeing my parents really work hard uh, because they came here with nothing, typical immigrant story, and worked their way up into the middle class. Um, and I was kind of like a typical geeky Jewish kid. I was into Dungeons and Dragons, but I mean, I'm dating myself right now. But I played Nintendo a lot, and I was smart enough to kind of get by without studying too much and getting B's. And then when it came time to college, closer to college, my guidance counselor was telling me that she didn't think that I'd have to go to like community college because I basically had like low B's and C's, and that's when the kind of light bulb went off for me, and I didn't think of myself like that. And so I started to really study hard. And but just to backtrack, prior to that, the first nightclub I ever went to, and the story is in the book, it's the preface, is I went New Year's Eve in New York City with my friends. And I was in eighth grade, I believe. At that time, I was maybe 14 or 13 at that time. It
A
was like,
little pass back ID action, right?
yeah, we back then you could go to like Times Square and get a fake
Yeah.
ID for $5. It was a long time ago. Now that won't fly now. But and it was one of the most incredible experiences I had. I went out with my friends. It was super cool. It was hard to get into. We bought tickets, and I just kind of got into it, just going out, not the business portion of it. Until later on, there was prom, and I learned from some of my close friends how they were making a lot of money selling prom tickets and doing prom events. But for me, I ended up going to NYU. I studied computer science because I was thinking to myself, I did the pre-med track also because I wanted to go to medical school, and I was, as a backup plan, thinking to myself, if I don't get into medical school, what would my backup plan be? And so I did computer science, thinking that I could fall back on that. I actually ended up going to medical school after NYU. I went to NYU Med. I got into that, which was really one of the highlights of my academic career. It was what I thought I wanted. And then, I was there for 3 months, and I realized it really is not what I wanted, mainly because I was working in software and computers during college, and I already got a taste of, during the dot-com boom, what it's like, how to make money, how much action there was in that field. And I ended up leaving and getting recruited to do a startup with my friends. Some of my close friends from high school and stuff were working at Goldman, and at that time they were giving everybody a lot of money, especially
Yeah.
20-year-old kids that didn't know much, 22-year-old kids that didn't know much but knew how to program. And I did my first startup, and I won't bore you with the details of that, but suffice to say that we did it for 2 years, built a product that was too early for its time. And then there was a dot-com bust, and, funding dried up. There was 9/11 that happened during that time. And, it was my first failed endeavor in the startup world. It was all software-based, SaaS-based, although the word SaaS hadn't even existed at that point. We called ourselves an ASP, which is an application service provider. So a lot of the terminology like cloud and all that we were way, way too early at that time. And that's actually the segue into how I got into the nightlife business. So my girlfriend at the time, I think Ariana.
Ariana?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ariana. She was going to FIT, and I was out of the job after the dot-com bust. No one was hiring programmers, right? So I couldn't even kind of do that. And I ended up going out a lot, and just looking around me, I came to the conclusion that everything that everybody was doing in the nightlife, restaurant, hospitality world was pretty backwards, because I had the taste of what it's like to use software and the internet to do marketing and those types of things. And, I saw people handing out flyers being thrown on the floor, list girls going around. And at that time they had, women or girls going around with a clipboard and paper, taking down people's phone numbers. And I'm like, there has to be a better way. And there was actually really, other than Time Out magazine, there was no way to even find out what was going on where online. And So that's how Junebug was born. I had this idea to do my first event, and we marketed it all online. We did it at a great space. We did it on Halloween, which happens to be a night that everybody goes out, and it
Like
was
the
a huge.
second most popular.
Yes, well, New Year's is the
Right.
New Year's, and then there's like a few nights. There's like Thanksgiving Eve that a lot of people
Mhm.
go out on. And anyway, so it would turn out to become a huge success. We made a ton of money that night, which blew my mind. And I'm like, wait, we just in one night made like $200,000 or something crazy like that. Um, and we did like a month's worth of work for that. If we do this every month, that's a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, let's scale this. How can we scale this? And that's how Junebug was born. And then we didn't just do our own events. We built a tech stack and tools for other venues, nightclubs, restaurants, promoters, everybody to sell their own tickets online, send emails, that kind of thing. And we've developed this database of young urban professionals that had disposable income, this elusive demographic that topped over 1 million people over the years. And there are a lot of brands that want to get in front of those people, like liquor brands, high-end luxury brands. So we had like Mercedes, we had Johnny Walker, we had a lot of really high-end brands that were our clients that would advertise with us online through our website, and also at our events, and we would place events, and that's how the business turned out and grew.
Cool. I have a few comments. I don't want to talk too much
Sure.
because I know that we have a bunch of things, but to briefly touch upon some things that you mentioned, I'm guessing that because your high school guidance counselor kind of nudged you into or recommended the community college, but you then went to a very selective school like NYU, that the potential was always there and you probably did very well in your SATs. Is that correct?
I did. I just really didn't study, and I didn't apply myself. And once I did, and I got some really good advice that I still take to this day. No matter how smart you are, you'll always get outworked by someone who isn't as smart as you. And so, it's just like talent, right? You could have really good tennis talent or sports talent. If you don't practice and you don't put in the hard work, someone who's not as talented as you will beat you. And I mean, it's cliche, but it's true. And so I took that to heart, and now even I work hard all the time.
I completely agree. You know, I would say I was about average for Cornell, but I basically would outwork people, and unfortunately, that led to me not really enjoying my college experience. But I'm also listening. I listen to a podcast called Founders, and I'm listening to one right now midstream on Rockefeller, on John D. Rockefeller, and I explicitly remember where they said that he was about an average learner, or maybe even potentially a slow learner, but he was extremely disciplined and very frugal, and he also would outwork other people. So, and I tell my wife this all the time, that intelligence, in my opinion, is overrated, because especially now, as long as you're healthy, you take care of yourself, you work hard, and money is made by you doing work when nobody is watching you. And your habits when no one's watching you at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, you can be scrolling through your phone, or you can actually be working and making up time that other people are not willing to make that sacrifice. That is going to be the big determining factor of whether you are successful or whether you're simply average, or whether you're able to accomplish your goals and meet your potential. A few other things which I thought was super interesting. My first experience in nightlife was in 1999. I was very young, about 15 or 16. And I grew up in the Catskills in Monticello, and my friends come and got me, like kind of surprised me and said, "Hey, we're going to Exit." They did that whole pass
Yeah,
back thing.
I
And
remember
I
Exit.
I actually hated it because there were like a lot of pretty girls there, and I came from like really small town, so I wasn't necessarily used to that. But um, they were like it was like a lot of house music, which I wasn't really experienced with. I was more into like hip hop and like listening to like Nas and like Jay-Z and things like that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't really familiar with the with the music, which I didn't really like. It was super loud, and also a lot of people were drugged up. So it was interesting that you had a positive experience, and I really didn't. I wasn't really into it. The other thing which I think is interesting is my cousins grew up in Roslyn, and they went to high school there, and their high school was extremely competitive. My high school, because I grew up in a relatively poor area, was in the Catskills in Monticello. It really wasn't competitive at all. I would frequently skip school, and the teachers were expected to give us A's, even though I was in like the honors classes. And high school was my best time. And I think that it's interesting because I think that 4 years of high school, it basically set me back one semester in Cornell. It took me 3 months to catch up. That's it. But I was able to have a really good time for those 4 years. I loved high school so much. So let that be a lesson that regardless of where you grow up, as long as you're willing to put the work in, then you can actually make up the potential deficits irrespective of where you grew up. Because many people from Long Island and Westchester and great schools, when they went to Cornell, they would tell me that their high school was actually harder than Cornell. But for me, it was the complete opposite. So,
That's I had a very similar experience as you, but different. I mean, I grew up in Long Island, in Great Neck, which is next to Roslyn, one of the best schools on Long Island, and extremely competitive. But it's true, I had my best, funnest times in high school, actually, and we went out all the time. I didn't work as hard, but then closer to junior and senior year, I started working harder, but not as hard. And then, when I got into college, I really worked hard, and I got very serious. First of all, I was paying for it, right? So the mindset's a little bit different there, right? And second, it was a lot harder, I thought, than high school, in my opinion. And so I had to work that much harder. Well, especially NYU, because there's like 300 kids in your class, and
right.
There's like, there's a lot of competition. So it's interesting. We had a similar kind of experience emotionally, I believe, but just totally different experience of why, of how, and why. But yes, I totally agree with you. I think, those are the times to have your fun, right? And then there's times to be serious. But what's interesting is that about, you said about the nightlife scene, I was like completely oblivious to the drugs and alcohol, and I never did any of that, right? Like, first of all, I didn't have the money to do that, right? Just to be honest. And second, like, I actually liked house music, and I was just like kind of like happy to be there and experience it than anything else. So that was my experience of nightlife. So I actually liked it, and I was like kind of predisposed to it before that. I never in a million years would have thought, throughout college and that kind of thing, that I would ever do anything remotely close to Junebug, right? So like I really thought I was going to either go become a surgeon, which is what I wanted to do, or like something in like computers, and I ended up doing something in computers, but it had to do with nightlife. It was a unlikely like success story or a mesh of two different industries, I think.
The other things that you mentioned, which were really interesting, is you mentioned $200,000, and this was probably around like 2002, like 2003, right?
It
So
was, yeah, it was 2001, I think. Yeah.
So in today's dollars, that's probably comparable to about like $350,000. So let that be a lesson that you can make a lot of money in nightlife. I remember one of the owners of Pink Elephant told me that one day they made like 350 or $400,000 in just one night. They would bang everyone out for bottles, and I think it was
Yeah.
David actually
If you
from
go to these Miami places, like, I don't know, like Kiki on the River and like all these other places right now that are so hot, like, Dave Grotman's places, and they're
yeah,
doing like $1 million a night.
yeah,
They're doing more than that. Like, I know because I just have friends in that industry. They're making a lot of money, but again, it's just the cream of the crop that's doing that, and really
right,
smart people who are doing that. They're just like every other industry. There are also the people who are kind of struggling, and they think they can do it, and they never get off the ground. Um, it's all about execution. It's they're not willing to put in the hard work. They think they get caught up in the pitfalls of nightlife, which is the drugs and the alcohol, the I don't know,
the
whatever,
women, yeah,
fame, whatever it is that they want. Um, you want to categorize as the pitfalls, and so they're doing it for the wrong reasons, right? It's very interesting. I had someone tell me that they wish they would have partied with me during that time, and I'm like, I would have never partied with you because I wasn't partying. I was
yeah.
like working 24
Yeah,
7.
you didn't really party. Like I wasn't a big partier either because I was working in investment banking. This kind of segues into the money's really in the list. So by building
Yes.
your list, you don't necessarily have to go out. Like when I was working as an investment banker, even though I was promoting parties like every single day, I was only going out. Initially, I went out like 4 times a week. Then I would cut it back, 3 and 2. And eventually I stopped enjoying going out. So it was almost like I would drag myself and force myself to go out. But the money is really in the list. And just like you said, that you built a list of about 1 million people, I'm sure that you were doing similar things to me where you were making sure that you had like, SPF records set up and DKIM, and you would make sure that everything was delivered to the inbox, because if you would get like a 2% increase in inbox delivery, then that meant an incremental like $5,000 or $10,000 of revenue that you were generating.
I'll do you even one better. You have to understand, when we first started, there was like no MailChimp. So
Mhm.
like I literally had to write my own scripts and set up my own SMTP servers. We had servers in our office in Chelsea where they were called Ironport. Now they're called Cisco servers, where like I had a rack of them and we had to load balance against them, and like throttle how many, I mean, a
Right.
million email. Like, imagine not having those tools and having to figure this out. And also for us, one of the key components of what we were doing, and you have to understand, this is like a pre-Facebook, pre-MySpace, pre-camera phone era, right? Like, we started employing photographers to go out to all the parties, not just our parties, everyone's parties. And people would actually pay us to bring the photographers there. And we had to, now it's like no big deal because like there's Squarespace and all these website builders and everything. But we built a system for like hundreds of thousands of photos to be uploaded by, the 50, 60, 70 photographers we had out every night, and
Right.
then uploading to our servers and then editing them and making sure that those photos were good. I mean, it was a really complicated system, right? And we were, at the peak of it, we were selling tickets. We were doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue, and that was the insight, for a lot of, and I think you had this insight too, but just obviously at a smaller scale. It was, for us, we didn't really see the party people like coming and being our friends, and me going out and doing bottles, or
Yeah.
like I had like 50, 60 employees. I'd have to come to the office in the morning at 9 a.m. It was more like we saw everybody that goes out as data, and we were figuring out how to monetize them. So
Right.
we were how do we get more people, funnel more people in, photos, events,
Emails. Right.
emails, this and
Contact
the other stuff,
information.
and funnel them in, build the database. That way we can get the sponsors, we could get the advertisers, we can throw our own events. We were doing all these, we could segment our database, right, into different sites, like males 30 to 40, and then send them to Johnny Walker events, right? Or, like, and no one was doing sophisticated stuff like that, right? It was like way out of the box at that time.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like 10 or 15 years early, like with the tagging, and then like yeah, it's just
Yeah, I wish I had invented tagging. I didn't. If we did, we would have maybe been the next Facebook. But that was the one thing that we never ended up doing. And actually, social media was the thing that kind of started the, like the irrelevance of Junebug at that time. And actually, it was also the segue into my next business, which became an even more successful business after that, which was easy texting.
Before we talk about easy texting, I want to just briefly touch upon something that you mentioned, which I think is really important. I believe that one of the most important aspects of why like the Dave Grotmans and the Noah and Jason from Strategic Group and Tao are very successful, and this is something that I missed when I initially spoke to Rich Thomas when I was a first promoter,
Yeah.
is branding. Branding is so incredibly important. I remember sending an email to Rich Thomas around 2005, 2006, saying, "Oh, I don't necessarily believe in marquee because nightclubs, they go in and out of business like every 2 or 3 years." And then he wrote me back basically telling me that he didn't like what I said, and historically that was the case, but they did an amazing job of building a brand that has continuity that they can bring forward not only into the future in that specific city, but in different cities. And Grutman and some of the most powerful and the most successful, like M Group, with Catch, etc. They didn't
Yes.
necessarily do that. They didn't do it with 10 June, which I'm pretty surprised. But they built a solid brand that they can then replicate in different countries and different cities to monetize on their earlier successes.
100%. So, they really looked at it through the hospitality lens. And don't get me wrong, those guys really employed data and also technology to help them. They have sophisticated CRM systems. They knew when you bought bottles, where you bought bottles, who you came with, how much you spent, when your birthday is, all this other stuff. They have like a sophisticated team. And you can't build a brand without that kind of. I mean, Marquis been around for 20 some odd years in New York, right? And it's still going strong. I think that's probably a record. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't know any other place that has done that. In my mind, maybe there has, but to the same kind of vein. For us, Junebug, right? It was the branding. Like we gave out cards that had the Junebug logo on it. We wanted our logo everywhere, and I didn't want it to be my face or Ariana's face, right? And the reason for that is that I eventually wanted to sell the company, right? And if it's all about me or like. I can't sell myself, right? I can sell my brand and someone else can take it. And so we were very careful never to kind of have ourselves in the limelight and really just kind of build the brand itself.
That's brilliant. However, I can see where, let's be honest, the majority of people, maybe not you, but in my opinion, and let's see if you agree with this, I think that the majority of people, especially back then, they kind of fell into nightlife because they wanted an easier way to meet women. And then they found out that there's so much money in nightlife if you're very successful, because sometimes people would spend, $4,000 to $5,000 to buy bottles to celebrate a birthday party, or they just want to act like a baller. So at that time, I believe that many people, they wanted either the notoriety or the social status and the access that goes along with nightlife, because by having that, you basically have to put forth zero effort to end up sleeping with a girl from Ford Wilhelmina Elite. I know that from my perspective in my early 20s, I know that you were dating Ariana and, but I was still very financially successful in nightlife, but I did enjoy the access to the women of making my list called, naming my list
Yeah,
after
listen,
myself.
I think that's actually one of the pitfalls that you have to avoid. And for me, it was never about that. And I think that the guys that you mentioned, it wasn't about that for them either. It wasn't about the women, the fun, the drugs, or this, or else they wouldn't be able to build these giant brands. And it's all about how you approach it. And I mean, these guys are teaching Harvard classes on how to
Right.
do hospitality, right? And so this is a real business, and you can do it in a way where it's more of a social thing for yourself, and you don't take it seriously, or you can do it where you build a huge, brand, and you make a lot of money, and you can build a very, very big business out of it. And also, because it's social, it opens the doors for a lot of other opportunities, right?
Right. I definitely agree with that. Like there would be times when, because I went out a lot and I was pretty fearless, and I would I would almost challenge myself to be rejected and not feel anything negative about that, because I knew that if I walked up to 100 people a night, I would get 70 emails, and of those, about 40% of them would become consistent clients, and it was just a numbers game. But I
Right.
do believe, and you would be able to meet so many people by meeting those like 50 or 100,000 people every single year, and by forcing yourself to be proactive and to be outgoing. The one thing I'll say is, if you are, somewhere between like 18 and 22, I do think it's okay. Now, obviously, you will have to avoid, like, I never have done hardcore drugs at all. I've never even smoked marijuana, and I've never been drunk before. I do, I don't believe that you have to be necessarily like celibate, when you go out. I do think that you have to make smart and wise decisions. Like you can't be overly promiscuous, but if you're somewhere between like 18 and 22, and the majority of people start out as promoters, I don't think that you're necessarily hurting yourself from, hooking up with an occasional girl who shows interest in you and who you believe is a good person. But then as you graduate more towards like ownership and things of that nature, and you start making more money, then you have to be even more careful and almost, necessarily like push that away, because the more successful you are, the stronger your brand is, the more money you make, the more of a target you become. So you have to walk even a straighter line. That's my
Well,
opinion. Perhaps you
yeah, I
disagree.
agree. Listen, for me, I never really had that experience because it wasn't about women for me. In fact, towards the end, I really didn't want, after almost a decade of doing it, it was time for a change for me anyway, because on a personal note, I wanted to get married, I wanted to have kids. And, if anybody who's serious and would want to do that, would want to, create a family, for the most part, would not want you to be in this industry.
I
Uh,
definitely agree. Yeah.
I mean, not to say that like Dave Grumman, those guys, they're married, right?
Yeah.
And they go out all the time, and that, and they have kids and everything like that. But it's an odds game, right? Just like you said, and the likelihood of finding someone who's okay with that is very low, or even finding someone who has the same core values as you in that industry is very low.
And
Uh,
and also, not only that, but if you have very high social status and you make a mistake, then you could potentially be subject to like a false allegation or something like that. So you have to
Oh,
be, be very careful.
100%, 100%, and so, yeah, listen, I think there are a lot of, all these things that you're saying are distractions, right?
Right.
So,
That is true.
if you want to go into this and make it a business, just like every other business, there are ways that you can kind of lose your way. It's just that these have like more things that are in your face, and it's hard to resist. And so, if you want to make it in this business, and you really want to make a big business out of it, you can't be distracted by all these other things that are
Yeah.
around there. You have to see through it, and really focus on how to grow your business, how to do it better and different than everyone else. And innovate, because everything can be disrupted and innovated, right? At that time when we did Junebug, there was a lot of resistance to what we were doing, right? People did not like us initially.
Yeah, I can imagine that clubs are kind of viewing you as a competitor where you're grabbing emails and things of that nature
Oh
and
yeah,
reselling them their own people.
people talk, and we took a totally different viewpoint. Like everybody was about exclusivity, hard to get into, celebrities, this, fame, and I'm like, there's no money in that, right? There's money in the masses. How
Yeah.
do you like appeal to everyone and like get as many people and sell as many tickets? And we were doing New Year's Eve, right? And like, this is a great example of it, right? Is that we were selling so many tickets for New Year's Eve. Everybody goes out on New Year's Eve, especially in New York, right? And so a lot of people will call us and be like, "Oh, I want to bring my 12-year-old or my 15-year-old." And I'm like, "Sorry, you can't bring your 15-year-old to Marquee, or you can't bring your 15-year-old to a club." And then, we looked at each other and we're like, why can't we? Why don't we figure something out to accommodate these families? So we're like, oh, Dave and Buster's is
Mm-hmm.
in Times Square.
Right.
They allow kids. Let's rent
Or
out
like,
Dave and Buster's. That's so outside of the box in the nightclub industry, thinking about New Year's. We made more money on Dave and Buster's than all the high-end clubs, because we sold a kid's ticket and we sold an adult ticket, and we were able to charge a lot more, and we were able to get an unlikely venue like Dave and Buster's, which had no idea how to price things, right? In the heart, because so it worked out well, because like people thought they were going to Times Square. It was Dave and Buster's. They could bring their kids, and it was huge. So it held a lot of people, thousands of people.
or
And
like
so
I remember a Mars 2112 was like
we
a
did
New Year's
Mars
Eve event.
2112.
Yeah.
That was too. I
Yeah.
forgot about that place.
Yeah.
That was a wonky place, but it was a very big venue and held a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I mean, those are like the unlikely ways that you can innovate. But if you're being distracted by these other things, that can't happen, right? You got
It's
to
going
be
to impact your money.
focused. Yeah, you got to be focused. I mean, we were also innovating in terms of tickets. I don't, when we first started, we'd have to FedEx you a physical ticket, right?
Yep.
And we were one of the first ones before Ticketmaster, because Ticketmaster would not, give a club, it wasn't enough money for them. It wasn't, enough ticketing. So, we developed digital tickets with barcodes. And we started doing it for our own events, and then we started doing it for everyone else, and then we started charging service fees. So we made a cut of everybody's tickets, and that turned into a huge business. And so now you could get your tickets emailed to you, and that sounds like not a big deal in an Eventbrite world. But when none of that existed, it was really innovative, right? It was super innovative.
I know that we're getting a little bit long in the tooth, and I have so much more I want to touch upon. So can we briefly talk about like easy texting, and like how Nightlife prepared you for where you are currently, like with your private equity space, like LP versus GP, more about your book, and like some recommendations for young. I'll regurgitate like those things, but if we can briefly touch upon like
Yeah,
easy texting and
I'll
how
just
your Nightlife experience prepared you for where you are currently.
Sure. So, what happened is that at Junebug, we were sending emails, and the efficiency of emails started to deteriorate pretty rapidly, about maybe 7 years into it, because at that point, then everybody had a MailChimp account, and the promoter had one, the club had one, the DJ had one, like everybody. So you're getting like, we used to be the only game in your inbox, and now there's like, thousands of emails and Facebook and everything like that being sent. And I was trying to figure out a way to cut through the clutter. Yeah. And in 2005, 2006, SMS started to become pretty popular because of the BlackBerry. And I'm like, how do we text everyone and there was no off-the-shelf solution when I Googled it, right? Just like Mail, there was no, like, just like when I first started, there was no MailChimp. And I'm like, oh, I got to figure this out. And it took me like, I don't know, a month to figure out how to technically do it, because that's through the phone systems. It's not through the internet. It's a little bit different. And so initially the alpha version I kind of created for Junebug, and then a bunch of promoters and everything got the text. The text worked really, really well. And they're like, how do we do this? And I'm like, wait, there's a market here. So I built an alpha version of it, a beta version of it, where I let other promoters use the system that I developed and clubs. And we used, our CRM database to sell into our existing clients. And, after a few months, we were starting to make like $10,000, $20,000 a month in revenue. And I'm like, wow, this is a business in and of itself. And this isn't just in nightlife. This should be like everybody should be using this to market, just like they use email. Mm-hmm. And that's when the light bulb went off, and we separated out the two. And for a little while, I ran the two until we sold Junebug, and I was able to just focus on easy texting. And I saw a much, much bigger, broader opportunity with software as a service, which is what my initial passion was always about. And that's how easy texting was born. And go ahead.
A few things on easy texting, and I don't necessarily have like insider information, but I was an avid user of the product. And these are very important points for people who are watching, because at this time you were very successful, but because you sold Junebug, and yes. But you still were in the trenches. I remember emailing customer service, and I would say maybe 50-50, you would be the one who would respond to the customer service emails.
Oh, 100%. So, I had to stay close to the customer to know what was wrong.
Extremely vital. So you have the founder of the company, and I'm going back with Shane, and I felt kind of awkward because it was actually pretty expensive. Like, there would be some days, and I had a pretty big like phone number list of around like 10,000 people, and then sometimes I would be spending like $250 to $300, and I would feel awkward like negotiating with Shane because I knew him. And I was like, hey bro, can you like cut me a deal and like reduce it? And you actually did. Like you did, Shane. Maybe I was a little bit annoying. You probably remember that, but you did, like, you cut my fees like basically in half, and I really appreciate that. The second thing is, I'm not sure if you guys invented it, but you were one of the pioneers for short codes. So you had like two different versions. You had the regular version where the delivery rates were lower, and then you actually had short codes where the delivery rates were upwards of like 90%. And when you said that emails were less productive, I think you were referring to that they were getting filtered out and not hitting the inbox. But with the SMS texting, it was amazing, because with
there's no filter.
Exactly.
99% open rates. I mean, this is true for even now, right? Like, I started easy texting in 2006. I mean, that was a long time ago, right? And I ended up selling that company, even though I still own a small piece of it. But it's a very, very big business right now, with hundreds of thousands of customers. And I ended up running that business for 10 years too. But part of it, and when I sold Junebug, I not only put all that money into easy texting, but I even like mortgaged my apartment right at that point. And because I kind of saw, like, I had the vision, because the email service providers had already built the blueprint of how to do this. And I was really surprised that they didn't see that as well. But listen, I'm not complaining, right? So it's true. I would spend a few days a week in easy texting just doing customer service. And that's where product ideas came from. That's where I knew how I could modify the product also to make it in such a way so that less people call for support.
Yep.
and really making the interface in a way that anybody can use it, hence easy texting.
Yep.
And a lot of people, in my opinion, who lose sight of that, and don't stay close to the customer and the product, it just doesn't go too well. Or unless you have, really rock star people who around you who do, right? And but I always wanted to be close to it, and it worked well for me.
And two quick comments on that. I believe you did definitely have rock star people around you. Like Amy was amazing,
Yes.
and she's also very successful now. And
Yes.
additionally, you kind of you kind of parlayed, you kind of changed your model with easy texting a little bit into more of what Google does and Facebook, because you had your own customers uploading their data that to your database.
That was actually one of the reasons why we wanted to get, separate Junebug too, is that there was that concern. They're like, well, we're going to give you access to our database. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I get it. I get where your concern is. And so we had to kind of get, go in separate ways. That was another reason why. But really the opportunity, in the events business, you have to reinvent yourself every year, or you redo your business every year, right? You got to like sign the contract with the venue. You don't know what's going to happen at that. You got to sell the tickets again. You got to market again. And it's like redoing your business every year. But with recurring revenue software businesses, you have a very regular income stream coming in, right?
Yep.
Those customers stay for a really long time. They don't really churn out. If you give them good service, they'll stay with you for life. And as time goes on, you get more and more customers. Your recurring revenue increases substantially, and you can build a very, very big business. And that's why SaaS companies get very big multiples versus like an events company, for example, which would not get anywhere close.
It's funny, when I was working as an investment banker, the companies that had the predictable revenue streams without high customer concentrations would always get the higher valuations because
100%.
there's less risk. If it's predictable, then you're going to get like the 7 to 12 times or 9 to 10 times the LTM EBITDA versus the other companies that are going to get lower multiples.
Well, that was one of the key reasons why I recognized that easy texting was a much better inherent business than Junebug. It also it was really taxing to go out to all the events and then wake up the next day, and come home late.
Especially as you get older.
Yeah, especially as you get older. It's, again, I wanted to get married and have kids and stuff. And so it all kind of I saw that was a better way to go in my opinion. And go ahead, please.
Can we talk about what you're doing now, and then let's talk about the book as well?
Yeah, sure. So in 2013, I ended up selling easy texting to a strategic acquirer, and I stayed on for a couple of years after that. And I did very well with that. And then after that, I could have started something new, but I decided not to because I had my first child, and I swore to myself that if I could be a present father, a present parent, that I would, and if I had the means to do that, then I should. And so instead of starting new startups, I started backing startups through venture. And I realized that, my job would be to help other founders, not just financially by investing in them, but also through helping them emotionally, helping them strategically, advising them, that kind of thing. And that my time would be better served that way. And that way I could also be flexible with my time in terms of, being with my family. And so I've spent the last 8 or 9 years learning how to run my own family office, which also I do real estate investments, and I do private equity where we've bought companies and turned them around and done that too. But where it's mostly learning how to invest, just to be honest. And I'm still learning. I make mistakes all the time, but I've had some pretty nice wins as well in terms of venture investing and other types of investing. But the thing that I like to do the most is venture and startups. That's the most exciting to me, right?
Do you have a quick aside? Do you have a tendency to more so bet on the jockey or the horse? Because from my experience, I think that some of the more successful founders or some of the more successful PE guys, they have a tendency to be like 70% jockey and like 30% horse, or what are your thoughts?
I think that's a good ratio. I mean, the horse has to be interesting, right? Or like I won't look at it, right? So like
Right.
if someone tells me they're gonna make another easy texting, that's not interesting to me,
Yeah, it's
right?
a saturated market right now.
Yes, that's actually if you want to kind of extrapolate back to nightlife, I dealt with so many different characters. I mean, I got screwed over every which way you can imagine, right? And I got to learn the personalities of really smart, shrewd people, right? Um, and like, I mean, when I say smart, I mean like street smart and business smart to not like intellectually smart, not like majority of guys in nightlife were not like philosophers and enlightened and that kind of thing. But you know, I got to learn from them to be able to assess when a founder has that like spark in them, where there's this cliche that you get to a brick wall and there are founders that will figure out a way above, over it, around it, and if they can't do any of those, then they break through it, right? And those are the type of people that tend to win. And have the tenacity and the chops to be a founder. I mean, I didn't even go into the thousands of times I almost lost my business, right? Literally, like I mean, it was a game of like how to survive all the time. When once you put one fire out, there was another fire that came, and business in most parts of it is not just how do you just do this or that, right? Like it's like how do you like technically build easy texting, right? It's not rocket science, right? Like it's a SaaS business, like people can do it. It's not just about that. It's about how do you sell it, and then how do you continue the business, and how do you grow it. And that's you need emotional fortitude to do that. It's not just about how smart you are. You have to have the chops to be able to, just like you said, you had rejection after rejection. It takes a certain kind of psychology to be able to wake up the next day having
And
like
go back at
really
it.
shitty options, right?
Right. And not take it personally.
And not take it, having really shitty options, knowing that the next day is going to be hard, right? It's not easy. And if you can go through that for long periods of time, for me, it took 8-9 years each time, right? And those are long periods of time. If you can do that, I think your chances of success are pretty high.
One quick thing, and let me know if you agree or disagree, but when it comes to business, and I think it's probably more so in nightlife, but in business overall, there's really no way that you can get around people doing shady things. Because in my opinion, I believe that people screwed you out of millions of dollars. But the weird thing is that some of the people who screwed you out of money, they would always take, I would, I consider them like friends, and they would always pay me. And you know who I'm talking about, but I'm not gonna mention
Yeah.
it publicly. But here's the caveat: no one in nightlife has anything bad to ever say about Shane Neiman. In order for me to not get screwed, the nightclubs and many of the most powerful owners, they tolerated me, but they hated me because they knew that if they didn't pay me, then I would blast it out to my email list and publicize it. So in a way, they were almost scared of screwing me over and not paying me because they knew that I would make a big deal out of
That
it.
was the
And that
backstop. That was the backstop.
but that hurt me though, because what happened is that they didn't want to work with me, but they didn't necessarily have a choice. And in private, they would trash me, or, they would like say bad things about me just because they knew that I wouldn't tolerate not getting paid what I actually generated and what I actually deserved. So
Yeah.
I think that
Interesting.
long term, even though on the short term basis, it probably cost you a lot of money, I think that on the long term basis, you ended up making that back from being able to maintain those strong relationships with some of the people who, I was unable to maintain those relationships with.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I got screwed over, but I never really screwed anybody over. And I think if you look back at the guys that are successful now, it's true for them too. I work with the guys that you mentioned before. They never ever they were really straight shooters.
Yep.
And I think that when I started easy texting, one of the things that made it much easier to close customers was they trusted me because I never did anything bad or anything questionable, or I never screwed anyone over. So you just never know when your reputation comes into play. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you know, I tolerated it, but I never dished it out. So that's one of the you gotta keep your integrity and what's important to you, because listen, it's the cost of doing business. It's like they call it slippage in
Right.
hospitality, or whatever. People steal, people.
Breakage. Right.
Yeah,
In
it,
retail.
it, it
Right.
is it is what it is. You're gonna get screwed some portion of the time, and you just need to chalk it up to
How
that's
the business is.
the businesses, and some businesses have more of it than others.
Can
Um,
we talk about, I'm sorry, did I interrupt?
no, go ahead, please,
Okay.
please.
Can we talk about your book and why people should purchase it, and what are some
Yeah,
of the
so
most
so
valuable
I got
lessons?
I got a copy here. So here it is. There's the back of it. It's a nice sized book. It took me almost 2 years to write and publish. And the reason why I did it is pretty simple. I found myself repeating a lot of the crazy stories and lessons that I learned to a lot of the startup founders that I've been working with, and I also kind of wanted to compile those into one book, all those lessons, and in a coherent book. And I wanted to be not cliche and like boring business book that you've heard a million times. So I thought that this would be interesting and fun and exciting and unlikely for you to think of as a business. And what the book does is not just tell you stories and kind of teach you the lessons. Each chapter is a different lesson. But I cognitive, like I purposefully at the end of each chapter gave examples of how I use those lessons later on at easy texting, or now when I'm doing venture investing, or every other kind of investing, how I use those lessons now and in my subsequent businesses. That I think is even more valuable, to kind of like illustrate how you can apply those now, right? So I wanted it to be entertaining. I wanted it to be funny. I wanted it to be some information that maybe no one knows about, because no one really knows. For the average person, no one knows what goes into nightlife, right? I think it's interesting, and it really has some great lessons in there for business and for life in general. Because I think if you can make it in the nightlife business, which is really tough business to make it in,
Very
you have
competitive.
potential. You have potential to make it in any business for sure. It's rough. It's very hard. It's very hard
You know,
to business to make it in.
it's funny. I met with one of the more successful real estate developers in New York City. I'm sure you know him because he's actually like Persian as well. And he explicitly told me that he loves hiring nightlife people because they have the stick to itiveness and the persistence of just being a go getter and they always get things done. So I think that if you're
That's
able
one of
to
the
overcome the
chapters.
hurdles,
Persistence beats resistance.
yeah,
Persistence beats resistance. It's true. Like, listen, just when you start off, like, who are you? You're nobody, right?
yeah.
Like,
And
how do you
even
do your first party? Like,
right.
you're gonna
And
fail a lot,
And
right?
even when you bring out 20 people, the doorman's not going to respect you. He's going to tell you that you brought out 10. You're going to get upset. You're not going to get paid. You're going to say, "Oh my God, it
Yes.
took me a month to bring out 20 people, and now I'm not even getting paid because I have to bring out 15. But you're telling me I brought out 10. Oh my God!" The doorman's telling you that you don't have a list there. He doesn't know who you are. It's so,
Yeah.
especially in the beginning, it is
I
so
I know.
difficult.
Look,
Oh,
there's a lot of stories like that. One time we stayed till 5 in the morning, and then the manager came out, told us to wait, and then came out and said, "Sorry, we're not
you
going to
didn't
pay
hit the
you."
bar minimum or something, right?
Yeah, they're like, it was like 5:30 in the morning, and I was like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
And it takes a special kind of person to take that and then do it again,
yeah,
right? So I think the book is really made. I made it for any entrepreneur who is thinking about starting a business, and you know what it doesn't matter what kind of business. These lessons are universal to everything. If you want to learn it in an entertaining, fun way, and also learn about nightlife and hospitality, then this is a great book. And I really, I'm very shocked because the other day I got to #1 in tech and #1 in hospitality on Amazon, which means that enough people have liked it, and it's got 30 reviews so far. And it's only been a few days, which I'm very grateful for. It's been a lot of hard work to make it where it's a book that won't bore you about business. There you go.
look, guys, well, I know that people these days they have relatively low attention spans, but books are one of the best ways to download knowledge from some of the most successful people in the world and some of the most successful people who have ever existed. For under $30, you can learn from mistakes, you can apply them to your own life. So I highly recommend that you get Nightlife Lessons by Shane NEMAN. I'm going to link it in the pinned comment and also in the description. And as I said previously, if you purchase the book, I'll give you 1 free week of trade alerts. And additionally, if you leave a 5-star comment, then I'll provide you with an extra free week. So just from that metric alone, the book will more than the free things, the incentives will more than pay for the book. But it's not that the book needs that. It's just that if I can remove any type of hesitation or hurdle for you to purchase this, then I would gladly do that because Shane is just an incredible guy. And I also know that his book is amazing and holds significant value for you and anyone that you want to buy and gift the book to as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Those are really kind words. If anybody ever wants to reach out to me, my website's shaneneman.com. I got my email on there. I'm one of those guys who replies to every email. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. And then also, while you're on his website, you should put in you should sign up for his email newsletter. I think he only sends it like once every 3 or 4 months, but it's super super interesting. It's about like travel and like new business ventures and things of that nature. It even deals with like health stuff because I know that you're also like big into like biohacking. So I highly recommend enrolling in the newsletter as well. And with that, I don't have anything else to say. Do you have anything else that you'd like
No,
to add?
no, just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, looking forward to hearing from your audience.
My pleasure. All right,
Thanks.
thank you guys. Get the book.